Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest here, Victoria Pio. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes,
Very cool. Well, Victoria, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Brazilian. I'm living in Brazil right now. I'm producer, model, and actress.
Very cool. How's the weather down there? Can I get more generic of a question than that?
It's great.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so the main idea of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comedian as a funny person telling any jokes versus the comic who is any person telling funny jokes. So just as more of an aside to that, most people will probably agree that you start as a comic and you evolve into a comedian. So with that in mind, first question is about the role of persona in comedy. So, how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus the real self?
It's very important and make all difference.
Okay. So would you say then that authenticity matters, or is illusion part of the magic?
The both, because works for some people works more delusion, and on others is essential.
So I agree with you 100%. So how's the comedy scene in Brazil? Is there a lot of stand up, or is it mainly media?
Have a lot of stand up, and they are so funny. It is so different than USA.
Yeah, here it's very very structured. So there I have a sense that it's a little more impromptu. Things are happening. Maybe even on the street, commedia dell'arte. Is that you see that a lot around, just walking around?
Yes.
Very cool, very cool. Okay, so punching up versus punching down. So where do comics versus comedians stand on this? Do you think that would you say that the audience is agreement with the comedian as a form of permission or alignment?
The audience make all difference.
Okay. Do you see a lot of like political commentary by comedians?
Yeah, for sure.
Would you say that they do it in a safe way, or are they taking a risk?
Take a risk for sure. Important in Brazil, this is so much take a risk.
So do you give them more credit for doing that, or are you actually concerned for their safety?
I think this is so funny.
Okay. So basically, whatever they do, you're not going to feel that maybe they've gone too far, or do you see that happening? Do they tend to go too far sometimes?
No, I think this is good. Go too far is good.
Okay, okay, very cool. Well, generally, I would agree. Okay, so cultural translation of comedy. So, how do jokes that work in one country bomb in another country?
In Brazil, this matters so much. Sometimes we see in movies,
Mhm.
and in English, it's not too good. It's not so funny, but in Portuguese, have all difference, and I stay more laughing about it when stay in Portuguese, cause change many culture.
Are you referring to maybe movies that have been translated into Portuguese, or yeah, when there's what if you watch it in English? Is it more funny if because it's originally designed to be in English?
It is more funny in Portuguese because we have another way to laugh. We have another way to joke with things. So the translation change.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. So, are you referring more to movies that are made in Brazil?
No, movies made in USA, and
Okay,
when have translation, they change a lot.
right. So you're saying that there's like is it maybe a mistake? Like there's something like the translation doesn't actually make sense, and so they add something that maybe makes more sense in Portuguese, but is not the intent of the filmmaker in the first place. Is that what you're saying? Okay, yeah, I could see that. But you watch it. Do you watch the same movie in English and Portuguese and compare the two?
Yes.
Is there, so what's the spread? So how different is it really? Like in the translation, is it like really far a big spread, or is it actually pretty tight?
Uh, big four.
Okay,
It is
so they're just
high.
going too far with it. All
Yeah.
right, that makes sense. So would you say that comics are more universal while comedians are more culturally specific?
Not exactly.
No. So a lot of people think of the comic as like a court jester. You remember in hundreds of years ago, they would have like basically the clown in the court, and he would be usually more generic. It wouldn't go very deep, right? And so would you say that the comedians, at least that you see, are they going deeper or are they kind of staying at the surface?
They can go in deeper.
Do you see like what when they do go deeper, what are their topics about? Is it more about themselves or are they criticizing society in Brazil?
Criticized society in Brazil have this so much, and we
Okay.
have a lot of for exploring this point.
Okay. What can you give an example of what some of the things that topics that they would discuss or go deep on?
Social medias, people in social medias, polit, and have Brazil is a big country, so we have different culture in the same country. So we explore this part.
So if I were to dissect the country geographically, would you say that there's more difference between the north versus the south or the east versus the west?
The both.
Okay. So that would mean that there's actually four different cultures.
Sometimes
Am I,
more.
maybe you never heard the question like this, but can you identify like what they are? Like, is there a quality that you can identify or it's not something you could actually identify?
Sometimes we speak different words for the same thing.
Okay.
Sometimes we have different feel about something, and this is very very big.
So it's a dialect. So it's basically the language itself that's really driving the difference in the culture, right? Can you understand all the dialects?
Yeah. One time I went to south of Brazil, and I think they're not from Brazil. They speak so different than me, but they are Brazilians.
And you can understand them and they can understand you?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that reminds me of England. I speak English in America. It's a very kind of I don't know what you say, abstract English. You go to England and they have very different accents, right? And I didn't understand English
Yes.
speakers in England when I went there. I was like, "Excuse me, I don't under." I didn't want to say it, but excuse me, I don't speak English. They're looking at me like I'm crazy. But that's
I
the kind
feel
of
that
experience.
way with Portuguese people
Yeah,
because they speak Portuguese, but it's so different.
yeah. Oh, very. So that's So what happens with comedy in that sense? Is there is there a different cultural translation in within Brazil because of that with comedy?
Yes. Yes, have is different. We have different words in Portugal and Brazil too.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. So, hmm, I'm assuming that maybe there is maybe in film that it's more obvious. You could see the difference. Maybe some filmmakers or even documentary filmmakers have actually gone through this and made it a little more obvious. Is there any filmmakers you maybe can identify that have done this?
I just know the names in Portuguese. I don't know the names in English because
Okay,
they changed too. They changed the names for be more funny too.
got it.
But
That does make
I
sense.
can send you later.
Okay, that would be very cool. Very cool. Okay. So so crowd work versus crafted work. So I would say that the comic it does more crowd work while the comedian performs does more crafted work. So the question is where is the sweet spot? Would you say that maybe what happens if a comic leans too much into crowd work or maybe if a comedian gets heckled?
Oh, this is a good point, but it is a risk.
It is a risk. So, what do you think? Should you take the risk of offending the audience, or should you just stick to what you know?
Uh, I don't know who is your audience. Sometimes you
Well,
can offend, and sometimes no.
that's a good point. So, say on in a live performance on stage at a comedy club, um, do you see that a lot where the comedian is interacting with the audience, or are they not doing that very much?
They doing this very much.
Is it funny? Because a lot of times it cannot be funny. It could be offensive and kind of mean, or do they keep it light?
In Brazil, they are so funny.
Okay. Does it ever get kind of mean and antagonistic?
No, I don't see that way.
Okay. It's a lighter way of doing it. So very important. So advertising and self-promotion. So who advertises themselves more, a comic or a comedian? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast to get the message out today. See you soon.
Oh my God. Um, Comedian.
Why would you say that?
I don't know because everything depends of comedian.
So, well, the reason why I asked that is short form media like TikTok and Instagram, well, like TikTok mainly, is so short that you only have time to maybe set up in one punchline, right? So that would be more of a comic, especially if it's repetitive. A lot of videos you see are just kind of not even jokes; they're just funny. And but when when you have a comedian, they go deeper into it, so it has to be longer. So do you think that the comics that are doing quick stuff on TikTok are they are they actually doing anything?
Oh, they can deal good with this if the comedian are very, very good on this, they can
Hmm.
do it.
So do you think that self-promotion is seen as selling out or is it necessary for survival?
It's necessary for survival.
You don't criticize them for doing too much?
I don't know, sometimes can be, but
Yeah.
I never see it on personally.
Okay. Okay, so censorship and offense. So does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point?
Yeah, they can prove a point, but not with much offensive.
Is that a good thing?
It's a good thing.
So who would survive better in a cancel culture environment, the comic or comedian?
A comic
They would do better because they're a little more superficial. Would you agree?
can be.
I tend to see that, but of course, the comedian is the one that we're arguing that actually gets more advertising because they're putting themselves out more. So sometimes the comic is safe, but they're also invisible, right? So you can't cancel invisible. So they have to be out
Yeah.
there. I guess you kind of have to be a comedian to be canceled. Otherwise, there's nothing to cancel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So timing and delivery, is it a science or an art?
are they're the both. They're science and artists.
Okay. Would you say that the comic relies more on the structure and the comedian more on rhythm and emotion?
Yeah,
So, okay. So laughter versus applause. Do you think that comics are chasing laughs and the comedians are chasing applause breaks that validate the message?
for sure. They need this.
They need it, but which one do they want? Do they want the laughter or the applause?
The laughter. The laughter.
Is there, do you think that applause are not valuable?
It is valuable, but the laughter is more
Is more?
authentic and sounds more genuine.
I could see that. So basically, you could give applause because you feel obligated. It's not actually funny, so you don't laugh, but you got to do something, you give applause. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
But then there's the other end where maybe you've been laughing so much that the only thing you can do now is applaud.
Yeah, that's the
That's at the
point.
that's at the high end if you're doing really well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so comedy is a commentary. So when does a comedian cross into being a philosopher or a preacher?
Philosopher.
Okay. So, so you probably don't see that. We probably see that here more in the United States that they become a preacher because we obviously have a kind of religious culture that does that more. But when they're doing that, when they start becoming a philosopher, is it good or does it dilute the humor?
Uh, Maybe for a big public, it's not good, but for selective, this can be good.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying like a private audience, maybe it's a company that you're doing it for, like in
Yes.
their conference area, or yeah, or a private party where you can maybe um, go in that direction.
Yes.
Okay. Um, Comedy and vulnerability, which a word I can never say. So would you say that comics hide behind their jokes and comedians expose themselves?
Comedians expose themselves all the time in Brazil.
Okay. Well, I don't mean physically. I'm just talking about their personality.
No, it is personality, them
Okay.
life, and all the things.
But would you say that the comic is hiding behind their jokes?
Yes, for
You
sure.
see that? So, okay. Um, so that kind of answers the question, which one's braver, the one that exposes themselves or hides? So obviously the one that exposes themselves would be braver, right?
For sure.
Okay. So legacy, who gets remembered? Will the comics tight five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
Comedians coachable.
It's always usually that. But if you're really good with the jokes, sometimes that gets remembered as well, right?
Yeah.
100%. Well, Victoria, where online can everybody find you?
Um, on Instagram, I have my Instagram producer and I have my own personal producer. It's Victoria Pio, P-E-O-N-S, Victoria Pios, and Victoria Producer.
You said PEO or is it PIO?
P-I-O, I'm sorry. In
It
Brazil, we say,
sounds phonetically, it sounds like an E, but it's actually an I. Okay, cool, cool. Well, thank you, Victoria, for being my guest. And if everybody could please like and subscribe, we will see you in the next one.
it's my pleasure. Goodbye.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.